Headquarters, phone duty. Just talk to me. Once every few months, I would get a new duty assignment that involved working at the headquarters building. The soldier had to sit at the desk where I first arrived for permanent duty and watch the phone and help the first sergeant with anything he needed. It was a 24-hour duty. You started early in the morning after PT and you weren't done until the next morning. The great thing was you got the next day off. Too bad you were usually too tired to have any fun. But anyway, my name came up and I got the duty. It was fun to be in the headquarters and help out the commanders. I had to look good and help whenever they needed it. It was like being a receptionist. When the night came, you were allowed a blanket at least, but you weren't supposed to sleep. The idea is you were there to answer the phone, which is how our unit would be put on alert in an emergency. It gave me a chance to catch up on letters and things. It was probably midnight and I was dozing off on the desk when the phone rang. I jumped. Shit! What was happening? It turned out to be a woman's voice. "Hi," she said. "What are you doing?" This was unusual. Were one of the guys setting me up? I told the truth that I was on phone guard duty for the unit. She listened and then said, "Would you just talk to me?" Okay, this was getting strange now. So I did. I told her about what was going on in my job. I asked her questions, but she didn't respond to them. She just wanted me to talk to her. I was lonely, and man, I wish I could meet her, as she had a very sensual voice. However, she wouldn't give me her name or her number, just wanted me to talk to her. After about 10 minutes, I started to get worried. What if there was an alert, and here I was on the phone? They didn't have call waiting here on the post yet. I better get off the phone quick. She didn't want to hang up, but she wasn't willing to give me her name or number, so I said goodbye. She called back a few minutes later, but I told her I couldn't talk anymore. I have always wondered what her story was. Did she want phone sex, or was she just lonely and really wanted someone to talk to? I will never know, but it was certainly a weird experience to add to the list. Drug checks. One morning, I woke up early as I had to go to the bathroom. I went, got back into bed, and noticed that I had about 30 minutes until PT. Good, a little more shut-eye. But no, something was different this morning. I heard lots of movement down the hallway. It was Staff Sergeant Watson. What the hell was he doing here? Then I heard the knocking on the door. I got up to answer. I could smell the fresh cigarette on his breath. He told me it was time to get up and pee in a cup. Huh? I spoke. It was a random drug test day. No PT, but we would all have to head over to the latrine and line up for the test. Shit, why didn't they tell me about this yesterday? I just peed and wouldn't have to go for a while. I told the sergeant and he told me to grab a canteen. It is funny because in the Army I never seemed to have any cups. In fact, I didn't have much of anything in my room besides the required equipment. But I did have my canteen, so I filled it up and started drinking while standing in line with the other soldiers. I wondered if they were testing for alcohol as well, because based on the brewery smells around me, many of them wouldn't pass. In an attempt to get us through faster and to make sure they could all see you when you were peeing, they made some of us pee in the sink. Yes, this is as disgusting as it sounds. I mean, what happens if you fill the cup up and you still have to go? Did they want us to finish in the sink? Well, after downing an entire canteen, I felt finally had to go, and I had to go bad. But of course, there were soldiers standing in line in front of me. In fact, most of them were doing the I gotta pee dance, waiting our turn, and people were taking so damn long. Finally, it was my turn. I got assigned the sink, of course, even though I had to go so bad, having my sergeant stare at me with my pants down, trying to stand on my tippy toes to pee into cup was not easy. After filling the cup, I asked about where to pee the rest and got my answer. In the sink, soldier, let's go. When I finished, there were still many soldiers in line, but I was done and could go to chow. We had these random tests about once every 3 months. Another thing happened after these drug tests. We usually lost a few soldiers in the evenings and weekends to special duties. These were the soldiers who were caught with drugs in their tests. It usually meant a demotion and detention for a few months. Detention involved working around the headquarters building, mowing, sweeping, and trimming trees on evenings and weekends while the rest of us were relaxing. Going to the field. Going to the field in 262 ADA was a lot different than in my previous experiences. It was quite an operation to have the whole unit to go. Everyone who had cars brought them into the motor pool to be locked up. We were very busy getting all the vehicles ready and checked for the trip that morning. I had to dispatch all the vehicles, and there were rushed repairs to make sure they were ready for the journey. Our first trip to the field was a short one, just on Fort Ord property. It was in the fall of 1989, and the weather was hot. Most times there was a huge cloud that hung over Fort Ord and kept it chilly and wet. It is sort of like San Francisco in that way. The autumn in Northern California is beautiful, sunny, and a lot drier, unless, of course, you're wearing a full set of BDUs and your face is covered in camouflage. We went to the field in a long convoy that stretched for miles. It was the first time that I got to drive my fuel truck more than a few miles to the gas station. The fuel truck was a lot different to drive than trucks I had learned on it at Fort Dix. For the one thing, the trailer was tiny, and you could barely see it in the mirrors. With Joe next to me dozing off, we made the drive out to the field without incident. Mopheads. If you've ever wondered what it is like to be at Fort Ord, read the book Clear and Present Danger by Tom Clancy, or even better, see the movie. In the movie, one of the actors is in the 7th Infantry Light Division and sneaks up on everyone. This is what it was like, lots of war games and lots of field time. But the thing that distinguished our division from everyone else was the helmet. We were called the Mopheads. We were trained to take old strips of old BDUs and put them through holes in our helmet covers. These strips, when done correctly, looked like a big mop on our heads. High-speed soldiers would intertwine twigs and branches into the mop when they were in the field just to make it more realistic and more camouflaged in the brush. Sorry, I wasn't that gung-ho, as I realized that by doing that you would have to clean out all the branches when you got back to the barracks. But some of the soldiers in the unit were, especially the second lieutenant. He was a nice guy, friendly, especially considering he was maybe a year older than me, but sort of clueless in ways. I think he was a little uncomfortable with the fact that 40 and 50-year-old men would call to him sir and salute him. It is a crazy military life where career soldiers who have been in the combat have to salute and call a 23-year-old soldier sir just because he has a college degree. But anyway, our lieutenant did his best and tried to fit in. Camo paint or makeup? Another crazy thing was the way some soldiers got into the camo paint. This was to add to the camouflage by making the face look like a tree or a bush. The stuff was just awful, especially when you were sweating in 90-degree weather, but we were required to cover our faces with green, olive, and black colors. Some of the soldiers took this seriously, almost like makeup, and their faces literally looked like the BDU they were wearing. For me, not so much. I did make sure I was covered, but then I would forget and wipe my face and get it all over my hands. Oh yeah, actually the hardcore soldiers would cover their hands with the camo as well. The raccoon and the peanut butter. While in the field, we set up a camo net which covered our entire vehicle and provided us a little area to sit and sleep in our cots. It was supposed to be a radar resistant so we wouldn't be seen from above. It all worked well as long as there was no rain, as it was just netting to protect us from the weather. Sometimes when it rained, I would climb up into my cab and sleep there. Also, this was a pretty good place to hide for avoiding those special detail duties that seem to appear during your only downtime. One morning, though, I went to grab some food I'd left in the truck, and that is when I saw them. Peanut butter footprints all over my seats. I like peanut butter, but yuck, the smell. It was a raccoon that had gotten in through the 2-inch crack in my window. He had found an extra MRE I had in there for emergencies and eaten the peanut butter. I guess he had a feast, and I was left with the cleanup. The foxhole. Because my squad was basically in charge of the motor pool, and there was no motor pool in the field, we were generally left to be the ones to build the foxhole at the entrance of the camp and guard it. This was not an easy job because it had to be big enough for 2 soldiers and deep enough to stand up in to our shoulders. There were generally about 5 of us working on it, if no one was called off for other details. The goal was to try and finish before sundown and then start guard duty. Yes, back to guard duty, and in the field, it was our group in charge, which meant we would be pulling duty a lot. I have to admit, this was sort of fun, though. It was your first real field experience as a permanent soldier, and I got along well with the people in the motor pool. I was making friends, and they made me laugh. We were lucky that first field exercise and found a soft place to dig. It might have been a previous platoon spot, so the dig went quickly. We finished just in time for dinner chow. I was hoping for a hot meal, but not this time. It was going to be MREs for the next 4 days. Damn. At least we could heat up some water and make them hot. Well, I still hated the chicken a la king even hot, but the turkey diced with gravy was okay, and the ham slices were good heated. Good is a relative term, however, when you're sitting next to your vehicle on a cot, covered in dirt from digging a foxhole. A little food, no matter what kind, tastes good. By my second trip to the field, I learned my lesson and brought Pop Tarts and Coca Cola with me to make sure I had something edible at all times. Training in the field, or can I really pay attention after eating an MRE? I woke up the second day in the field having pulled the 1 to 3 a.m. shift alone in the foxhole. So far, we had parked the vehicles, camouflaged them with nets, set up our tents, dug a really big hole, spent a lot of time on guard duty in the middle of the night, and gotten about 4 hours of sleep. Since we were in the field, we didn't have PT that morning, which was nice, but the meatballs and barbecue sauce for the morning MRE wasn't sitting too well. We were off to training today, which was about first aid. We had a lot of this training in the past in basics, so it was more of a refresher for everyone. However, sitting there under the trees, listening to the birds chirp with the temperature in the mid 80s wasn't the most conducive way to learn. I was really having trouble focusing. One of the staff sergeants nudged me to get going, and I was back on track. We spent most of the time listening to instructions, but then we got to wrap up our fake wounds with gauze and splints. We learned about gaping chest wounds, wounds that require tourniquets, and how to check for heat exhaustion. After about 4 hours of training, we got to take a break, but by now my stomach was just not feeling good. I went to find the latrine. It turns out they did have permanent latrines at this field location. I went in and was shocked. It was basically a bench with holes in it in every space, every foot or so. Oh, I was not feeling well by this point, and the sort of embarrassing thing was that there were already 2 soldiers from my unit sitting on the bench. BDUs down around the ankles. So I took a place as far away from them as I could, but there was absolutely no privacy for anything here, and it stunk like the worst outhouse you have ever been in. Luckily, the other 2 left, and I had a moment to finish up and get back out to the training. By the time I arrived back at the group, the training had ended and everyone was headed to lunch. Maybe it would be something better than breakfast, but no, it was more MREs. In fact, it would be MREs for the whole 4 days in the field. Heading home, or guess what? More work. The day arrived. We were finally heading home for my first field exercise in permanent duty. The weather was hot and was a nice change from the usual clouds that hung over Fort Ord. We were all in need of a shower, some rest, and a real meal. We packed up a lot faster than we had set up, and I think we had our foxhole filled in about 15 minutes. I was happy we would be eating soon, but then Joe brought me back to reality. We weren't eating before we cleaned up. Shit, what did that mean? He said we had to wash all the vehicles and clean all the camo nets. Damn, it felt like being back in Fort Dix. 25 vehicles are a lot to clean after going to the field with the dust and dirt. And then I realized how important it was to fold up the nets nicely in the field. We had just rolled them up and thrown them on the truck to get out fast, but this meant the nets had picked up a ton of leaves and branches. Back at the motor pool, we had to roll out all the camel nets again and pick out all the leaves before rolling them up. I wouldn't make that mistake again for sure. After we finished most of the vehicles, they finally let us go eat and shower. I rushed back to the barracks so I could get in before the others. Dinner was wonderful that night, except that I was so tired and hot. But I got to use real silverware again. Unfortunately, this was one of the shorter trips to the field. The next one would be more than 10 days long. Back to Army school one more time. Dear family, hi. Well, I have a little bit time in class, so I thought I would plug out a quick letter. I'm doing well in my class, and I got 100% on the first test. I am now TAMS, the Army Maintenance Management System certified. Now we can go to PLL, Prescribed Load List. This job goes right along with mine, but it deals with the ordering of repair parts. It's a lot harder because I haven't worked on it at all. I guess it will be good training. Dispatching vehicles was getting to be second nature for me at my job. However, I was in a role for which I wasn't officially trained, so this meant more school. In the fall of 1989, I was sent to additional training for 3 weeks. The training was just up the road from the motor pool on the way to the barracks. Again, another nondescript building for me to see inside. It was a big class this time, probably more than 30 students in a long, narrow room with 4 rows of desks. The classes were long, from 9 to 5 every day. I still had to keep up my work at the motor pool, so I would go in early, get the paperwork fixed from all the dispatches the previous day, and then head over to school. Dear Dad, some incredible tennis matches, huh? I was glued to the TV all weekend long. School is going all right, long hours though, all the way to 5 p.m. 8 hours in a classroom environment is almost too much to take. It will be 3 weeks long, and then I will probably get a 3 day weekend. I never did get an extra day off, but the classes went well, and I succeeded in graduating top in the class again. Here is what the certificate said. Certificate of Achievement awarded to Private First Class Michael G. Travis, Distinguished Honor Graduate. Prescribed Load List (PLL) and the Army Maintenance Management System (TAMS) courses for outstanding scholastic achievement in this course conducted by the MCG Improvement Training Branch, Directorate of Personnel and Community Activities. The example that you have set, along with your dedication, positive attitude, and willingness to put forth extra effort, shows that you are a definite asset not only to your chosen field, but to the United States Army as a whole. It is always a pleasure to commend exceptional effort, dedication, and exemplary performance. I really don't remember much of the class, but I did learn a lot more about the way the whole motor pool worked. There were many forms to learn. Some of them were really confusing, which is one thing I could help change to make it easier for my soldiers. But the process for changing a form is almost impossible. I asked about it. Anyway, after 3 weeks of classes in September, I was back to regular work. Earthquake. Hang on. On October 17th, 1989, I returned home from work and went to the bathroom before heading to the mess hall for dinner. I was sitting on the toilet when I felt it, a huge earthquake. As it hit, the lights immediately went out, and all I could feel was the waves of the earthquake under my feet. All I could do was grab the handicap bar, hang on, and hope for the best. After a few moments, it was over. I finished up and went outside. Many of the soldiers were out of the barracks as well, and we could see the cracks in the concrete on the building. The epicenter was less than 40 miles from us. Someone had a battery-powered radio, so we were able to hear what happened. Historical note. This was a big 6.9 magnitude earthquake that hit California and stopped the third game of the World Series in San Francisco. The quake collapsed part of the Bay Bridge, bringing part of the top level down on the lower level, killing 42 people. More than 65 people died that day during the quake. Watsonville, just up the road from Monterey, was hit pretty badly, with many houses destroyed. The damage from the quake was more than $5 billion in total. Sleeping that night was almost impossible with all the aftershocks. It felt like someone was shaking you awake, and it happened every few minutes. It was back to work the next day, and the power was back on soon after. If nothing else, this gave me probably the most interesting story when someone asked, "Hey, where were you during the big quake?" Well, I was on the toilet. Is this a brewery, a bathroom, or what? Ugh. Another run in the morning with these guys. Some of them were utterly disgusting, having been drinking most of the night, not brushing their teeth, or showering before coming to PT. Yuck. The smells permeating from their sweat, alcohol, and bad breath. The key to running in formation is to try to get an outside spot near the front. You could hear the cadence better, which kept you going, and the smells didn't hit you as much. I didn't always get so lucky, though, and then the odors would permeate my nose and brain. I always managed to stay positive, though. If it was a short run, I wouldn't have to put up with it for too long. And if it was a long run, most of the brewery guys would fall out of formation and be walking behind us so I could move up. Ironing. Now I'm a maid as well? In basic training, there wasn't a big need to iron our uniforms. We only had 3 of them, and we were constantly getting them dirty, so the best we could do was make sure they were washed and folded. However, by the time we got to permanent unit, it was expected that we look good. Having Seaton as a roommate was both a blessing and a curse. This guy knew how to keep his uniform looking amazing. I'm not really sure how he found the time, as he was rarely home, but he did teach me about spray-on starch. This was the key to a great uniform, though not recommended by the higher-ups, as it would take away the special coating on the uniform to make it radar diffusing, which would help in war. But we did anyway, because it made the uniform look so nice with the tight seams and lines. So generally for about 1 to 2 hours on weekends, you would find me in maid mode, with my ironing board, iron, and spray starch, making my uniforms look nice. This habit carried over into the civilian world, where I would be known for ironing my jeans. It took me a while to get out of that habit. Living in the barracks. Life in the barracks was sort of like living in the dorms of college. When we were in town, we spent time going to bars and just hanging out. Sometimes it would be a lazy Saturday, sitting around getting the uniforms washed and ready for the next week, or trying to recover from the Friday evening fun. Here's a casual picture of me after CU won a game in football. You can see the desk, lamp, and wall locker were all standard issue. Yes, of course, I'm drinking a Coors beer brewed in Golden, Colorado. On post housing. My friend Mac in the motor pool was married, and I met his wife when I first arrived. However, things didn't work out for them, and about 2 months after I arrived, she moved out, back to the East Coast, I think. Anyway, Mac decided not to tell anyone that she moved. They weren't divorced, so technically he was still married. Well, his house became party central for the next few months. He was a bachelor living in a 2 bedroom, 2 bath house away from the barracks. I woke up many times with a hangover on his floor on a Saturday or Sunday morning, wondering where all my stuff was. Mac had only request, if you want to come over, you have to bring beer, and you had to clean up when you leave. So he basically got free beer and free maid service, but what we got was a safe place to drink, watch TV, and hang out. Mac's house basically had no furniture, a couch, a TV, and a stand, and his bed. Unfortunately, his house parties also lacked women. Well, there were women, but they were the girlfriends of the other guys. At the time, it seemed like we were all dreamed of having a girlfriend to marry. Once you are married, you get so many more benefits, a place to live away from the barracks, and your own kitchen. Another field duty. Dear family, I finally figured out why we left on Friday. You see, the Army has a regulation about convoys traveling on Saturdays. So we had to leave on Friday because Saturday all day I was needed as the battery was flying in from Ord to Hunter Leggett, and I had to be there to refuel them as they came off the plane. Well, it was 18 vehicles, one at a time, so a plane would land, drop one off, fly all the way back to Ord over and over 18 times. It took from 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., and it was hot out there. I never realized what an 80-mile difference does to the weather. People were coming off the planes in heavy jackets into 105-degree weather. Needless to say, Sunday we got to chill, so one of my buddies and I worked on trig and calculus. August 28th starts school, and we are going to take a trig class together. They don't have any higher math classes, but at least it'll keep me motivated for school. Sorry for the handwriting is bad, but I am on guard duty and writing by a full moon. I am tired, though, so it is tough to stay awake. The weather here reminds me of Colorado summers. It is really not cold at night, and the sun is out constantly in the day with no clouds. I have finished one book, but with our busy schedule, I doubt if I will get to do another one. I'm looking forward to next Tuesday. We go home. Hopefully I will write more later. I miss you all. Love, Mike. This was an interesting duty assignment. Joe and I drove down on Friday and parked near the airfield on top of a hill where we could see the C-130 airplane land and take off. Air Force rules only allow Humvees to have a quarter of a tank of gas or less when flying. So as the vehicles came off the plane, they needed fuel right away. So one by one, the planes would arrive, and one by one, I would fill them up with fuel to head to the field where we would be staying for a while. It was an interesting exercise, but with the flights landing and taking off so fast, there wasn't a lot of time to do much between each delivery. Math class for fun. Hello, family. Well, I have some bad news, and I'm not sure how to tell you. I won't be home for Christmas this year. I didn't know it either, but the trig class I'm taking with my friend is a 16-week class and doesn't end until 22 December, so I will be unable to fly home then. Hopefully, my plan is to take off in March. Then I will be able to get out of the Army around September 25th. That is the plan. I hope it works out. Anyway, it is better this way than to have hope to get leave and have it turned down. I am checking the possibility of correspondence through CU. In fact, I think the Army tuition assistance, I can take the class for $36. We'll see, though. I guess that is all for now. I miss you all much. Love, Mike. Joe and I loved to work on math problems together in the motor pool when we didn't have much going on. At his suggestion, we took an algebra trig class together at Monterey Bay Community College. It was in the evenings twice a week, and with the military discount, it was practically free. I have always been good at math, and I was able to pick up what they were doing quickly. It was fun to get off post with Joe and just be able to hang out at a class. It started to make me wish I was back in school. Now that I had more confidence from advanced training classes, I was feeling ready. The class went well, but I didn't realize it was going to go all the way up until Christmas time. It was okay, though, as it was better that I waited on leave because most of the soldiers in the Mulder Pool wanted the time off to be with families.